back to another DriveTime episode. Today I'm here with Bill Mulligan. Bill, glad to have you here today. You're a big part of TBN and you also own a creative agency. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, Chris. I started my career online after about 5 years in traditional marketing back in 1999. And at the time, we focused specifically on getting people to come to our clients' websites, their digital assets, and make the most of them. So we didn't design sites, we didn't build sites, wasn't in programming or anything along those lines. Simply, helped our clients get the most out of their digital assets. And that grew over time. We started to specialize. One of our specialties was travel and tourism. As we worked with clients, provided them with consulting services, we then started to roll out, get into design, build, coding of websites, mobile applications, things along those lines.
Wonderful. And you and Kyle have been really instrumental in kind of bringing TBN from the back of a napkin idea into reality and turning it into something that it is today. Tell me, we've worked with a lot of clients at TBN. We've talked a lot about, with people, how to kind of go back to your roots, how to get the most out of their digital assets. And I think TBN really fits into that vision. It's probably why you were excited about it from the beginning. But the traditional quoting mechanism for particularly the charter industry has been a challenge. It has been in a language that most consumers don't understand. It's been clunky. It's been the whole send in your data. We'll give it to a salesperson. They'll generate a quote at some point in the future. You'll get a quote back. And really, that's where TBN has kind of bridged that gap. What can we talk about here just briefly before we kind of jump into the meat of this, about where this fits into what you've done over the years in terms of charter operators, group transportation providers getting the most from their digital assets?
Yeah, I mean, over the course of the last 20 or so years, we've really seen the end user, the customer's comfort level leveraging digital tools just grow through the roof, right? I mean, if we think where we were when the first websites were coming out in the 90s to the brochureware sites, just the basic, hey, this is a little bit about me and that's it doesn't do anything more than that on their website, to the ability to upload content, user-generated content on their own. As we look at that evolution, though, one of the things that has been consistent is that the user expects to be able to have their information needs met whenever they want, and now with the advances of mobile, wherever they want. It's no longer okay for a user to have to wait for someone to respond to an email request form, or wait for someone to answer the voicemail that they left at 1 a.m. When it was convenient for the customer, but no one was working at the operator. As I mentioned before, we started, one of our specialties was travel and tourism. We have watched the user grow from having an expectation of, I want to know something, to I expect to do something now, and not have to wait for it. It's almost become an insistence more than anything else. And if they can't get what they want when they want it, they will just move on to the next guy who can provide it. So when I got together with Kyle back a couple years ago, and we looked closely at transportation industry, motor coach, livery, etc. One of the things that became clear is that there was a significant gap between what the customer expected and what most of the industry, if not all the industry, what was providing. And this gap was the real-time service to meet a charter request, right? And deliver something that could be committed to in what I'll call it is a frictionless environment, right? There's no resistance whatsoever. And so we worked hard to create that at TBN, and yeah, it looks like it's resonating well.
Yeah, well, it's certainly the reason that I'm sitting in this chair today, because we've talked on the sales side of things for many years about the fact that there's been this disconnect between the rate of progression in the group transportation ground industry and almost every other industry. I mean, I can book an airline ticket, I can rent a house in Rome, there's a million things I can do right now in my pajamas on a Sunday night, and unless I need to charter a bus. And we've talked about that in other episodes, and now we're bridging that gap and kind of reshaping the expectation that customers have when they get to a web property for a transportation provider. So, you talked a little bit about this notion of the progression of websites, and let's focus particularly in the group transportation space. From the original kind of websites were phone book ads that were just virtual, that it was how do you contact us, and it was still a big focus on pick up the phone and call us, and then that moved to the brochure site, where here's all of our buses, here's our stuff, and it was a very robust, very well executed brochure version of what we would like to tell our customers. And early on, those things worked. As you know, my agency has built a lot of websites as well for operators around the country, and it worked really well and became a tool for salespeople in the sales process, but wasn't inherently in and of itself a sales process. So where are we now in the group transportation space when an operator says, I have a website? Kind of what is it that they should want from their website? What is it what should they be doing with a website, and what should they expect from their website in today's kind of virtual world? And I know that by the time this episode comes out, this will be old data. The rate at which things are changing and updating and things, but I think we can see some trend lines that are have some age to them over the last 2-5 years that really point to a next gen, if you will, of group transportation sites on the web. So what do you see in terms of trends and what people should be looking for their websites to do?
I think, first and foremost, we'd boil it down to one thing. I mean, you talked about, being able to book a trip to Rome in your pajamas. I mean, the flip side is true. The owner of a motor coach operator should be able to make money while they're sleeping, right? So both sides of those are true. The customer wants to do something while in the middle of the night at times, and the owner wants to make money even if there's no one sitting there in the office. And the focus on that sort of 24/7 availability is really becoming an important part of of managing the customer journey. And when we talk about what's happening now in the web, especially as it relates to group travel operators, this idea of starting to look at customers and determining where a website fits in the overall journey of the customer and not the be all end all, I think is an important point. When a customer arrives at a website, what awareness do they have of the operator already? Where did they come from? Where did they come from? Facebook, where they already had some level of familiarity with the operator? Did they come from Yelp? Did they come from a Google search listing? Were they just referred by a friend? I mean, what level of sophistication or awareness of the company do they have? How can the operator validate or legitimize themselves in the eyes of the customer? There's a lot of data now pointing to the importance of social proof, right? Social proof is just sort of the modern day phrasing of something that you and I both know, having been around for a while, which is the testimonial, right? The ratings, the reviews, the testimonial. There's a extraordinary amount of value now put in testimonials, and one of the reasons for that is because people are starting to realize that advertising is not necessarily the best way to build trust with a brand. Right, the customers are no longer trusting advertising the way they did maybe 15 or 20 years ago. So establishing that legitimacy through that social proof is a value. Um, Guiding that customer on their journey on the website to the appropriate calls to action is an important point. The person who may be visiting your website from California when you're an operator in Pennsylvania is perhaps a different type of prospect than someone who may be visiting your website in Pennsylvania, let's say outside the Philadelphia area in Paoli or whatever it might be themselves. And how you manage those experiences and customize those experiences for those different audiences is becoming more and more important. Supporting them again on that 24/7 environment is critical. And one of the key elements of support, as we talked about, is provide them the ability to quote or book the trip right there when they want. So these are some of the trends we're seeing, really take hold in the group travel space that truthfully have been taking hold in other industries and other areas of the web for probably a decade plus at this point.
Great. So you touched on a couple of things that I want to dive a little bit deeper into, and one of them is that when we talk to our customers, at the end of the day, a website is another tool in your arsenal, and we've often looked at it as one of many. So you've got your salespeople, you've got the website as a tool that your salespeople use. The end goal of all of the tools that are in your quiver really is to book more business, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's no other purpose of a website than to book business and ultimately to support the customer along the journey, even post business, right? But you've got all of this effort put into building a website, and the ultimate goal is get them to book work with me. That's my goal, right? And there's people who'll say, well, there's an education component, and there's it's really important that we have all these pictures of our buses because people need to see it. But all of that is to the end of, we want you to do business with us. And I think you touched on a really interesting point about what's the win? So how do we measure the win? Like, what's the end goal? And I think that's something that TBN has helped kind of bridge that gap, because before the end goal of a charter booking website in particular, if you think of like a charter operator, somebody comes onto your website and the end goal was fill out the quote form. And there's some interesting analytics as you dug into that, because you touched on the fact that what the ultimate goal in getting them to book is to give them what it is that they want, right? And that we want them to leave feeling like they were satiated, like, okay, I got what I needed, I can move on, I can like, for example, if I'm shopping for an Airbnb and I'm on Vrbo and I'm shopping for a house, and I'm looking at, okay, here's where I want to go, here's the properties that are available, and I get to the end and I do a booking, right? I go through the process, pick my dates, sign up, pay my deposit. My behavior at the end of that experience is pretty clear. I leave. I leave the website, I sign off, I'm done, right? I have done what I came here to do, and I can now move on. When we study the analytics currently of websites, what we find with our customers, and I don't know if this is different for your customers, but with our customers, people go through the process, they get to the website, they look around at a few pages, they go to the get a quote button, they fill out the get a quote information. That is the traditional method, right? So they hit a button and it takes them to another page that says, thank you, your information's been sent to our people and they'll get back to you soon. and what we see the behavior is that then they continue
Yeah.
to shop. They continue to go back through the website. They go back and look at some more pictures, and they look at this and they look at that. But if you really look at that from a customer experience, like you said, you're engineering that, then what you realize is that at the end of that get a quote, which was ultimately your objective, right? You want them to do business. And that was as close as you could get. Pre-TBN, that was as close as you could get to having someone say they want to do business with you, but they aren't satiated because they haven't left yet. So talk a little bit about, as you look at your customers and as you're counseling them, particularly those who are using TBN, how do you kind of reframe that goal in their mind in terms of what is it that you expect people to do on the site, and then what do you expect a completion to look like?
The first thing and most important thing for people to recognize is that the ultimate goal of the website is to be able to provide the customer the means of doing what they want to do, how they want to do it. TBN provides an excellent tool for perhaps the most common scenario, which is that a customer comes to a website and wants to know how much a trip will cost and whether or not that the trip in the structure that they've prepared is available to them, right? There's inventory availability, it's within their cost range, right? All of those things. That's the most common scenario, but that isn't the only scenario, right? There is an audience that says, you know what, I want to talk to someone. And they should be given a phone number to talk to. There's an audience that says, you know what, I actually wouldn't mind just chatting with someone and getting a little advice, right? And that should occur as well. It's our job when preparing a website, in the group travel industry, to make the customer, the visitor to the website, feel as though they can get the answer they need using the tools that they want to use. Ultimately, success in that regard, it is measured through customer satisfaction. But if we were to quantify that, it would be phone call usage. It would be quotes requested or even bookings. What you don't want to see happen, you don't want to see a customer come to a website and then start poking around and having to continue to poke around and explore more pages of the website, and then walk away. If you are able to guide them down an effective path quickly, they arrive at a homepage. They say, you know what, this looks like a reputable company to me, right? The equipment looks, relatively new. The drivers have smiling faces. I like the reviews that I'm seeing. All right, how can I go and figure out how much my trip's going to cost? Guide them down that path. Let them get to the point where they have been given the information they need to make a go or no-go decision. That's as far as you want to take it with them. Don't hold them hostage for more than that, right? That's become dangerous.
Yeah, I think there's an old paradigm that kind of has hung on, and it stems back to the brochure style websites, right? That there was a win associated with that.
Yes.
That there was a win associated with, I tracked my analytics and my average page per user was 9 pages, and I'm winning because I got you to look at 9 pages of my website. But I think that, I read some statistics that said that the average attention span of an adult in the United States is 3 seconds, which is a little bit shorter than a birdfish. And so by the time we get them to our websites, we have very little time. We don't particularly want them to, and that depth now is actually an indicator of a broken path. You're talking about kind of engineering that path that goes as quickly as possible from, yes, this is a company I want to work to this is how I'm going to work with that company. And I think that that's something that has been lost in these transitions, particularly in the group transportation space, that people are hung up on. I want people to be on my website for a really long time, and I want them to look at a lot of pages.
I mean, chasing those metrics. It used to be in the early days hits, right? How many hits did your website? Right. As I always tell my clients, I can get you 1 million hits in the course of the next 2 minutes. It's going to mean nothing to you, right? Or I can get you, for $25, I can probably get you 100,000 page views. It's going to mean nothing for you, right? I mean, really what we're in the business of doing, we're in the business of providing a customer the ability to validate, price, and book as quickly as possible. This frictionless environment that I've referred to, right, as quickly as possible. That's really the end goal here. The rest of the metrics, they don't matter. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't good data that you can pull out of analytics. I'm a quantitative marketer. I very much believe that there's a lot of great data you can pull out of analytics, popular routes, popular inventory, right? Equipment requests. I mean, all of those things that can be pulled out that truly are meaningful. But let's not get lost in the noise of page views and time spent on site and things along those lines. I'd make an argument that I can have a much more productive website by reducing page views and by reducing time spent on site if we're delivering the experience that the customer wants.
Completely agree. I have a love-hate relationship with Google Analytics because I love the amount of data that exists there. I'm with you. But the opportunity to really look deep into behavior and how people are getting there, when they are getting there, where they're coming from, all of those things is great. But it is easy to get into the weeds with what matters. And I work hard with our customers to make sure that we're watching the right things and paying attention as an agency to the things that matter. And I couldn't agree with you more. People there's often confusion. As you know, when you build a website, you need depth of a website in order to create relevancy, in order to create, to give Google what Google wants to be able to rank you higher in the algorithms. You need depth in a website. And there's a lot of pages that get built that are built well. They're built if a customer were to find that they'd be good pages, but they are not designed in part of the ecosystem of what we want customers to do. They're built specific for a purpose, and that purpose isn't the sales process. So let's talk about, one of the things that always comes up when I have these conversations with people is that my salespeople use the website a lot. And I'm a big believer that sales, that there is still a brochure component to websites, but where and when those become relevant compared to the online experience that you're talking about engineering, where someone gets to your site as quickly as possible, validates you as someone they want to work with, and moves into a more robust online quoting process where they can be satiated and come to a logical conclusion of their shopping. Last episode, Kyle talked a lot about being first, and he and I are both huge believers in, look, if you're the first one to get them a quote, get back to them, give them the information that they want, and let them feel like, okay, I'm done. I don't have to keep shopping. I don't have to keep looking. I go back to that Verbo experience a lot. Like once I've picked a house and I've said, yes, this is what I want, and I've paid my deposit, I'm done shopping. I've checked it off the list. I can tell my wife we booked the place. I don't need to keep looking. And I don't have to try to shop it for price or any other thing. I just say done and move on. But there is this experience when someone picks up the phone. As you said, there is still customers that want to pick up the phone. There is still customers that want to have that one-to-one personal contact. And we need to make sure that until the world has moved completely away from that we're providing that service, which means that websites have an offline kind of a value to them, where a salesperson can send an email that says, here's 150 pictures and a video of this one type of bus. If you need that to make a decision, you have access to it. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you see the offline, and I don't really mean that as offline, but the kind of out of line use of a deeper website is in today's world compared to this idea of getting them to the homepage and to get a quote function. So
going back to my what I said before about looking at the customer journey and when they want to interact with the brand, with the operator, how they want to interact with the brand. I think one of the things that TBN does well is it allows customers to self-service to the extent that they want to self-service, which in turn allows the salespeople to spend their time either on the more complicated opportunities or service the prospects who, as I said before, prefer to pick up the phone and actually talk to someone. It allows the sales team to be more efficient, right? Um, I'd also point out that there is a lot of activity that occurs perhaps between the initial contact on a website and an actual booking that can occur in sort of a post-visit nurturing phase. So if we look at a customer's experience, they come to the website, they start to fill out a quote request, or perhaps they complete the whole quote request. That quote request is delivered to them for them to act on, and maybe they're sitting on it, right? Maybe they're thinking about it. Maybe they are comparison shopping, although there's a lot of good data that we have available that the person who provides the real-time quote is the one who ultimately gets the booking, right? We've got a lot of good data on that one. And truthfully, that's not just true of group travel. That's true of many industries. We're first to bring it to group travel. To motor coach operators. There is a lot of nurturing that can occur between that quote request and that booking. Some of that can be done through marketing automation. TBN and its sales driver platform has a lot of lead nurturing, sort of quote nurturing tools that can be set and automated that will, nurture or guide that person towards the close. But also the sales team can get involved offline as well, and look at a particular quote type, look at a particular itinerary, think about ways in which they may be able to add value to that particular itinerary, and perhaps push someone across the finish line, in this case, to get the booking. So there is a lot of opportunity to free up the sales team's time to focus on the higher value opportunities, the more complicated opportunities, and and free them up to focus on the ones who maybe just need that little extra nudge to get across the finish line.
Yeah, we were talking to an operator that's deploying this week, and we were talking about the 80-20 rule that, look, if you could take 80% of your quotes that are the simplistic quotes and the ones that, you can put into a truly automated process, lead nurturing emails scheduled, based on when the quote happened, when the trip's moving, when the quote expiration is going to happen. If you could take all of that and put it into this 80% bucket, and then you could take the 20% and say, these are the trips that we really, really, really want to book. And you go back and do, in addition to that automated nurturing process, that you're using your website strategically to give them the data that they want, right? Whether that be information on, your cleaning protocols for COVID, if that's something that you really think is a value add proposition, and you can send them the page of all the things that you're doing from your website, the equipment that they happen to be interested in booking, you can send them to those pages, which, we've engineered TBN to be quick and easy. Sales Driver is about going from here's my data to I want a quote to you've got your quote in a matter of minutes, not days. And so this gives you the opportunity to go back and be like, okay, great, here's all of our pages on this type of equipment and this type of equipment, and here's pages on the level of service that we offer, and here's all these things, where you leverage these web tools outside of that process to land that more valuable business to you, and start to be very strategic. And that's one thing in this kind of post 2020 world that operators are choosing to be very, very strategic with who they're working with. And there's more demand than there is supply, so they're able to kind of hand pick the deals they want to work with and replace some that, there's been a lot of, for many years in this industry, there's been business types that we take because it was business, but it wasn't business we really loved, whether it was hard on the equipment or lots of miles or difficult hours of the day or whatever it was. And so now we're able to kind of backfill our chart of accounts, the companies that we're working with the hand-picked business, the more valuable business. And that's something that operators are really, reporting who were using Sales Driver as a big win that they didn't see coming out of the gate. Everybody looks at it from the ease component, right? The wow, this is so much easier. Our salespeople have 30, 40, 50% of their time in a day back that they don't have to generate quotes and send emails and do follow-up and all those things. But what they didn't realize is that this gets that free time, and the way that it's engineered and built, that it makes it very easy to prioritize the follow-up that you do want to take part in, and lets you leverage your website in a different way. Let's talk a little bit about this 80-20 rule. Says that 80% of your customers are going to want the online model. They're going to want to go from homepage to booking widget to a quote generated in the least amount of time possible. So if you were to give advice to operators out there in terms of how to engineer that process the quickest, the easiest, what would you say from all of the websites that you look at? What do you need to change on your homepage to drive people from your home to the booking widget and through that process as quickly as possible?
If we look at, there's idea in marketing, identifying the personas that visit your website, right? And that's a fancy way of saying, if we can look at the audience profiles or the customer profiles that come to your site, right? And start to arrange the content on your site in a way that resonates with them. The content looks appropriate for them. The trust component, as I mentioned before, is appropriate for them, and the call to action is clear for them, right? As opposed to request a quote, just as an example. You may want the call to action to be as strong or as impactful as get an instant quote, right? And there's a huge difference in the psychology of believing they're getting an instant quote versus requesting a quote. And yes, as you said earlier, is it really going to be 4 days before someone gets back to me on this trip that I'm hoping to do this weekend, right? That's the massive differences between the use of language there. We try to advise clients to look at the information hierarchy, right? The priority of importance of the information. There's no question, however, that the most important piece, the highest priority piece of information is what is this next step for them, right? What is the call to action? What do we want them to do? Everything before that is simply, table setting to allow them to eat what we want them to eat what we're serving them, which in this particular case is to request a quote. It is possible, Chris, that you could have multiple audience types, multiple personas visiting your website, and managing or creating an environment that allows those different persona types to each identify appropriately within the website when they arrive on the homepage is a very important part of guiding them to the next step, or making them feel comfortable to taking the next step of request a booking, right? We have, in some cases, institutional visitors. We have bulk visitors. We have mom and pops, a family of 4 just arranging it for a scout trip and things along those lines. We have a lot of different audiences visiting our clients' websites, and preparing an environment that allows each one of those different types of audiences to feel comfortable that our clients as operators are sophisticated enough to meet their needs is an important part of the overall presentation. That can be done through the use of effective choice of pictures and sliders, effective language. But I'll bring back again what we talked about earlier with the social proof, having perhaps a variety of different elements of social proof, testimonials that match up with the audience's expectations of what they need to serve. The institutional booker versus the scout troop booker versus the, I have a wedding this weekend and need some shuttle work done booker. Those are different audiences that are going to be looking for different things.
Yeah, we've been a huge proponent with our client base to have what I'll effectively call landing pages, just so we all know what we're talking about. So, we're we're a proponent of having a wedding page and a sports transportation page, and that when you're proactively marketing, and it's not likely you're going to get there from a Google search, but if you're proactively marketing, that you're driving people to a page that's hyper relevant to their needs, right? Like, brides want to see that you're a bride, that you do wedding transportation. That's what they want to see. And when you present like, hey, we can do that plus airport shuttles plus conventions and conferences and hotel shuttles and all of these things, it actually dilutes their interest in working with you, because they don't feel like you're specific enough in your services that you care. Now, people in the industry know it doesn't make any difference where we pick you up or drop you off, or what you're doing at either one of those locations. Our job is relatively the same, but it doesn't change the perception of the customer. They want to know you care about them and their moves, and so we've been a proponent of those types of pages, because you're right, you're going to have more than one type of buyer come to your site, and some are more savvy than others. Some know how to buy our product from us, and are tour operators are a good example, that they book a lot of business with the industry. They know how to book. They understand our language. They speak the same language we speak, and they're more price sensitive because they're trying to make margin and all of those other things. But that's a lot different than the bride that wants to book. And so if you're speaking specifically to one or the other too much, especially on a homepage, that you lose it, and you lose the interest of one or the other.
So that's a very interesting point, Chris, and it goes back to something we talked about earlier when we were talking about analytics and hits and page views and all of those things. The most successful websites, the homepage is often not the most used page of their website, right? They're set up, their marketing efforts are set up well to drive their individual personas, the different audience types, so that the first point of entry into the website is the weddings page, the athletics page, the tour page, whatever it might be. Those operators are the ones that are having success, because that first experience with the visitor is catered to, it's customized to, it matches up with who they believe they are and what they want to see, and that's what leads to success.
Yeah, no question. And we've seen that play out. And I think the hard part is, look, 10 years ago, I was invited, a little over 10 years ago, I guess now, I was invited to go and teach a class. It was my first class that I taught in the motor coach industry, and it was on websites. And we had owned the agency for some years at that point, and we were talking, we came in kind of loaded for bear. And I'll never forget that the very first question that somebody raised their hand in the audience, and the very first question was, we have phone book ads. Do you think we really need a website? And it was like this shock for me, that was like, wow, I mean, we were so far beyond, in the web, even at that point, that, it seemed like a no-brainer that you would have to have a website to compete. And I think now we've moved way past that. Most operators, if not all operators, have a web property. They understand it, but they're really still not, to your point early on, leveraging that asset, right? They think that by virtue of having it, that they've checked that box. And I think there is a lot of opportunity in the industry to focus on, how do we leverage that asset? How do we advertise it? Are we doing pay-per-click? Are we doing virtual? Are we doing partner advertising with these places that can drive specific traffic back to our specific pages? Do we have a depth of our site where those pages exist? If you're at a wedding show, you're not driving people to your homepage, you're driving them to the wedding specific pages on your site. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity for that. One of the things I want to touch on before we wrap up today, though, is one of the challenges that exists in the industry is there's operators that have multiple objectives that they're dealing with in a homepage environment. So, for example, we might have a charter company that you want them to do a charter request, but at the same time, they have a line run operation that is running, that is selling tickets. They're running casino shuttles, and so you can buy a ticket on a casino trip. They have a tour department where they're selling full-on tours, and they have a single homepage, and the amount of calls to action become confusing to the layman, to the buyer. So tell me what it is that you would say to someone who's trying to do all of those things with their website, and how should they organize that to where you are engineering that customer journey, knowing that you have 4, 5, 6 different total consumer groups, right? Because if I'm in the market to buy a bus ticket on a line run between New York and Boston, I am not in most cases a charter customer, and I'm confused by get a quote. I have customers call me all the time that they're like, we added this line run, and now I've got people using the get a quote form to try to buy a ticket on a bus that leaves in 20 minutes. And so what would you suggest? How would you conquer that? How would you cross
Pretty
that
common
hurdle?
challenge, actually. And, as we talked about, the ideal is that we get someone to enter the website at the appropriate page, the shuttle page, the charter page, whatever it might be. But that isn't always possible, right? There are many times that people are going to enter through the homepage. And we've talked about in this chat here about audience profiles, right, and personas, and the different needs of the different personas. Really what we're hoping to do on the homepage is allow someone to self-identify what their need is as quickly as possible, and then channel them down a very focused path related to that. So if we know someone is interested in an airport shuttle ticket, right? Get them to self-identify on the homepage quickly that, hey, I'm interested in the airport shuttle. And then, don't get me wrong, they can always use the menu to get to the charter or whatever it might be. But everything they see and read and click on at that point is really geared towards that airport shuttle run. We typically will take a persona-based navigation or a service-based navigation in that approach. And you'd arrive to a homepage, and there are a few key buttons sitting in front of you, front and center. Hey, I'm interested in a shuttle run. I'm interested in charter. I'm interested in, whatever it might be. And they know to quickly identify themselves by clicking on that button. And at that point, everything's about their particular need. That is actually more important than just having a click for an instant quote or all those things. Get someone to identify quickly, this is what I'm interested in. Tell us by clicking once. Right? We just need one click to know that you're interested in their airport shuttle run, and then we can present the entire environment to what you need about that airport shuttle run. So that environment that is clean, focused on the different service identifications, allowing someone to make it clear that they can self-identify by clicking on those buttons, that's the key to success from what we've seen.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we've seen that kind of manifest in a number of different ways. We've seen some people who have a lot going on in a single company, and I'm talking full-on tour operators that have line runs, that are doing shuttle services, that are also doing charters, and all of these things wrapped into one, that have gone all the way back to their homepage, their main domain that they advertise to, has just 4 buttons. There's no pictures, there's no anything. It is all self-identification, right? That's it. Now, then I leave and go there. And I would say that it's probably worth going back further than that. I've seen it done well where homepages are simplified. Most times the issue is that you're trying to do too much on a homepage, right? You're trying to give 10 different types of buyers the best experience possible on one page, which makes the water so muddy that nobody has a good experience. Nobody's sure what you're asking them to do, and a lot of times you see people build them in sections where this is our charter section, this is our tour section. There's so much stuff below the fold.
Scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and I don't find myself because I'm last on the list and I leave.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I will say that from our standpoint at Deliverabilities, we try to get people to say, look, let's go back a step even further and say, how are people getting there to your page from a shuttle, or if they're there looking for shuttles, or if they're there looking for tours, how did they get there? And is there a way that instead of driving them to that place where they have to self-identify, that you can self-identify them through your marketing efforts and push them into a solution before they ever got there? So you can help identify the channel, right, as they're identifying there, and push them into that experience where, if you instead of always using your home address on an advertisement, for example, you could use a unique URL that drove them directly to this place, as opposed to going to your homepage. Yeah. So I think there are some options there, but I think it's important what you said, that the objective in an environment on a website where you have multiple objectives, the very first objective has to be to identify what it is that customer wants, and then give them as quickly as possible the opportunity to complete that objective on your website right now. And I think that's great advice, and really something that people, especially in the group transportation space, need to kind of shift towards, that whatever it is they want to do, right? And if you're a charter only operation, if that's all you do, and you only have one objective, then you can know that when they get there to your site, you can just make the assumption that what they want is to charter a bus. And you can make your calls to action very clear. Get your idea of get an instant quote is a great one, as opposed to get a quote. That those little tiny changes can result in many times the number of quote requests. This week is a great example of that. We had a meeting this morning with Kyle from DATCO, and he reported that we made minor changes to the booking widget, just in terms of language, flow, those types of things for DATCO and our other TBN customers. But they saw a multiplication,
nearly double
quotes. They saw double the quotes immediately following, with no other changes, no marketing changes, no changes to how much their marketing spend was, or where they're advertising, or their Google Analytics, or their placement in Google. None of those things, other than better engineering that customer experience and giving people what they want more clearly and quickly, that resulted in almost twice the quotes. And I think that that's a testament to what you're talking about, that a lot of people look at their website and they think, oh, I know I want to change this and I want this, and they look at some of the leaders in the industry, their websites, and they have 100 pages and all these things, and they think that's what I need to do, and until I can do that, I don't need to make changes. The change of a text of a single button can result in many times the numbers of quotes, based just solely on small changes. And I think that if we're going to talk about a takeaway, that would be what I would say. First, obviously, you need to look at your website as the objective for a charter operator is to get charter quotes, period, right? Like that's it. And the more quickly you're able to deliver that information, the more seamlessly you're able to do it, that's a win. So, Sales Driver is obviously taking that in a place that has never been before in the industry. And that's why I'm here. I'm excited about it. I love the fact that in the middle of the night, quotes are being generated, that customers are inputting their own data, that the quotes that are generated are sent to them automatically, and my salespeople come in the morning and they can actually see what's happened, as opposed to have a pile of work they have to
make money while you sleep. Make money while you sleep. You summed it up well, Chris.
Absolutely. And I think that's a valuable component here when we look at Sales Driver as a whole. But I think it's also one objective of how to make better use of your web property. If most operators go and look at the number of visits that they have to their site versus the numbers of quotes that they receive through their website in a month, there's a huge discrepancy there. You're talking about thousands of online visitors versus a few, 10, 20, 30 online quotes in a month. That can be changed. And that is an indicator of of whether or not you're giving people what they want. Now, some of that traffic I know is garbage and they bounce off the site and they weren't there, but it's not 50%. So if we look at that and we say, okay, we should be getting more business from our website. Our website should be working harder for us. How do we make that happen? And the answer isn't always, let's go back to zero. Let's start over and rebuild. And there is value in add a tool like Sales Driver, refine some maybe just the homepage and make it more clear of what you want them to accomplish. Spend less time showing pictures of outsides of buses and more times pushing towards that call to action of get a quote. Add some testimonials, to your point, on the homepage in a logical way. I see a lot of people put them in big scrollers where they show up at one at a time, and instead of a list of them, the social proof conversation is huge. And I think the biggest, quickest way to see the power of that is go to Amazon. People buy products based on 4.5 to 5-star reviews. And they could be garbage reviews because nobody ever reads them. You just see that there was 1,000 reviews and it's 4.5 stars, and we go, great, that should be, that's what I want. People have already done.
Or go to booking.com and you just show me anything with over a score of 8.5, right? The same idea. Yeah.
Exactly. Same concept. So, put those on your website, and with those couple of changes, you may be able to really reshape how effective your website is in the grand scheme of things. Before we close up, I'd love to ask, what would you say the takeaway should be if someone's going to leave and they have limited time, limited budget? What should their takeaway be from their website, and what should they be watching? Like, what is it that they should look for? And we talked a little bit about this idea that after they hit the get a quote button, they keep shopping around. What should they be looking for to say we're delivering what our customers want, and what should they do in order to get to that?
If there was one metric that I would look for especially for the charter operator, the quotes to visits ratio on the website. Look closely at that metric. How many visits does it take to get one quote on your website? Okay. If you focus on growing that number, changing language to instant, get an instant quote as opposed to just get a quote, watch that number, that ratio of quotes to visits on the website keep growing. That would be a measure of success. It's easy to do. Doesn't take long to implement, doesn't take, lots of coding hours or, thousands of dollars to developers. Focus on that as your metric. Don't focus on page views and visits and all of those things. Those aren't meaningful business numbers for you. Quotes to visits.
Excellent. What would be a piece of advice that you would give someone about, whether you're going to use Sales Driver or not? What should the end goal be? How do you know when your site users are satiated versus just abandoning ship?
They're abandoning ship there's a sort of an intermediary step. They're abandoning ship if they spend too little time on the site, just a couple of seconds. That's an indication that your home page or whatever the landing page was probably needs a little more attention, right? The second one is if they're spending too long on the site, that means that they don't have a clear call to action of what to do next. Okay, I would really focus on ensuring that the audience knows what to do next through they can self-identify, as we talked about before. The personas can self-identify quickly and easily, and that they're meeting their clear call to action goals: phone, quote request. Instant quote request or typing in a chat bot quickly and easily.
Wonderful. Well, I think those are all great things. I think that, the website is often looked at as the tool that salespeople use to try to do deals, right? That it is their tool. I think that this shift away from that towards your website is actually your most effective, least expensive salesperson in your organization is an important one, because one requires that we hire a bunch of salespeople that then have this bag of tools that we call our website. And one is that our website is doing what it should do, which is generating dollars, and that the salespeople can continue to use it as a tool, that the resources do exist there, and that they become very strategic with how those things get used, but that ultimately the salesperson is, or the website is a salesperson, and that it is out doing its job to close
the
sales.
hardest working salesperson.
And I think that's the hardest working, right? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, no sick time, no paid time off. It just goes to work for you. And when you look at it in that light, you start to think about it differently. You start to think about, okay, what if, to go back to your visitors versus quotes metric ratio, right? If you're measuring that ratio and you're like, okay, if it takes 30 visits to get a quote, what happens if we meaningfully invest in marketing and we go from 200 visits a day to 2,000 visits a day? And can we keep that ratio the same? You can grow your business not based on how many employees you have, but based on how much marketing you do, because you know that if I add more visits, that I'm going to see a growth in quotes. And that becomes a really powerful moment as that inflection shifts from a tool for salespeople to a salesperson, my most important salesperson, especially in the environment we're in right now, where we're running lean sales staffs. It's hard to find the right people. That they have to be trained on kind of older, antiquated softwares that require weeks and months worth of training to be comfortable using in order to be effective salespeople. Institutional knowledge that's required from a pricing standpoint, kind of all of the things that SalesDriver is kind of removing from the equation, that makes it plausible to think of your site as a salesperson, because it can ultimately deliver a quote, ask for the sale, and get them to click a button that says they want to book it, all with zero interaction from a salesperson. So I think that this is that moment in the history of the industry, and it's fun to see customers implementing it for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden seeing the true value of it as it gets to work for them.
It's great, and because all of a sudden it becomes less of a sales problem and more of an inventory problem, and that's a good position to be in, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. When we're able to help change the problem, that's one that we're.
And then we can work with them on pricing profitability issues, right?
Oh my goodness! If that's not the greatest side effect of this installation, when a company installs a SalesDriver and they're working through the process and they're seeing these benefits and their salespeople are being freed up, to watch the side effect be that they're able to increase bottom line profits by 30 to 40% almost overnight, with incredibly small amounts of pushback from their customer groups. That's where I just can't stop smiling, because that's a big deal. We ran that calculator the other night, and with two simple changes, being weekends, so Fridays and Saturdays, and then the time of year that you're historically sold out. If you just use those two inflections to increase your prices, you're adding 37% to bottom line profits at the end of a year for every asset that you do that with. And 37% in a 10 bus operation, you're talking about $350,000 of extra revenue that did nothing. There's not $1 of increased expense in order to meet that objective. So to see that as a byproduct of this is a pretty powerful thing as well.
Chris, thank you. I've enjoyed this.
I appreciate you, Bill. Appreciate your time. Appreciate all you're doing for us and for TBN and the industry as a whole. And thanks a lot for this conversation. I know a lot of people are going to find it really useful.
Thank you.